Hello there, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for this Q&A. We've got everybody on mute, and that's just something that works out a bit better. But obviously, the whole idea of this is that you've got an option to ask some experts some questions around water and what they would need to do, or what you would need to do, potentially if there was a local lockdown in your area. So on the right-hand side of your screen, there should be a little pop-up box there, and on there should be a section saying questions. If for any reason you can't see that, there should be a little orange arrow with orange block with a white arrow in it. If you click that, that'll pop it out and you'll be able to see on there the question. So at any point, please feel free to type a question in there. That'll come through to myself, and what I'll do is I'll get that question in when we've either conclude the questions or when it kind of fits in. We'll play it a little bit by ear. One of the things that we do have on there as well is we've got some downloads for you. If you've visited any of our webinars over the past few months, we've got a nice little infographic on there to show you what you should be doing around flushing, particularly to do with Legionella, if your building is shut or is going to be shut for a period of time. There's also a guide on there as well to show you how to do flushing, and attached to that is a log, which is really important, which I'm sure Michael will undoubtedly talk us through later. And then the final bit that we've got on there is we've done a guidance log for local lockdowns, and basically what this is it's a little form there. It's not exhaustive, but what it should do is just kind of trigger some thoughts and make sure that you've got some really helpful information at hand should for any reason there be a lockdown in your area, that you've just got it there and everybody knows where it is, and just a helpful little guide for you to use. It's in an Excel format. You can edit it yourself, you can add to it. If you'd like to give us any feedback on that as well, that'd be great. We'll get that re-uploaded and available for everybody on the website afterwards. So I'll do a little bit of an introduction for everybody, just to give you a bit of a flavour of who we are, just in case you don't know us. So this is on my screen, and it might be different if this is on the video, but to my right, I have Michael Dean. Michael is our Legionella manager, and his bio goes as follows. So Michael graduated with a degree in environmental biology from Essex University in 1997, and he worked as a microbiologist for 3 years. From there, he went on to work for Northumbrian Water, and he headed up the water regulations team. He represented RAS Technical Sport Group, and the highlight for him was that he was involved in the designing of the water systems for the 2012 Olympics, which I'm sure he's got a great story about the royal family somewhere in there, because I think you did come across them there, didn't you? And then he became a panelist for BSI, and he helped write the British Standard on water use for temporary events. And for the last 7 years, he's been the water systems manager, primarily looking after Legionella for our bit of Total Water Solutions. We've also got Paul on the video as well. So Paul's our pipeline solutions manager, and he's been a part of the team for 6 years, as have I. Paul spent 26 years in the industry, working for both water companies and framework contractors. He specialises in sort of commercial leak detection, mains repairs and mains laying. Paul also designed and implemented the district meter areas, DMAs, for Northumbrian Water, which allows us as a water company to have a much better idea on where water is getting used in our network, and making sure we get to deliver that great tasting water straight to your tap if you are in our supply area. We've also got Louise Moritz on the call as well today. Louise is sort of my partner in crime, and has sort of got a history in education and health, as well as sort of people engagement and business development. I'm Andrew Sinclair. I'm the business development manager for Total Water Solutions. My background was originally in stack emissions monitoring, working for Northumbrian Water, and then I've transitioned across to do business development work for the Total Water Solutions team. So there you go. There's a little bit of an introduction on who we are, and I'll pass this over to Louise to ask our first question.
Okay, thanks for that, Andy. I just wonder if I can ask you, Paul, if a bit like's happened in some areas in Aberdeen, if we suddenly found out tomorrow that we were having to go into a local lockdown, what sort of advice would you give us around sort of water within our building?
So yeah, water within your internal structures is quite difficult.
Externally as well. So
yeah, well, internally, I mean, Michael's more of an expert than me, but you know, what I would say is we're going to be coming up to the winter period now, so everything you can lag, absolutely get it lagged now before the winter comes, because an internal burst can cause a lot more damage than an external burst, mainly, especially in offices, you know, computers, things like that. So yeah, lag and more lag. That's what I say. But you don't want to drain your system down, really, because that creates issues that Michael can talk about. What you really want to be doing is flushing it on a on a sort of a strict regime if there's a lockdown and the place is shut. But I'm sure Michael can give you a bit more on that, Michael.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that, Paul. So I think that the first thing for me to start off would be to check your risk assessment. We're doing a lot of flushing and recommissioning at the moment. So the learning thing for us was basically that a lot of risk assessments we've seen have just been out of date. So I think it'd be a really good opportunity to review your Legionella risk assessment and make sure it's accurate. The issues we've had, if that doesn't go right, we've had areas where we've looked at schematics and we've had whole parts of buildings that have been missed from either the schematic or the plumbing's been modified, and it's not reflected in the schematic. So when we come into quote the water systems for remedial works or flushing or disinfections, you're on a loser from the start, because you can only quote based on the information that you've got. So it's good to have a good baseline. So I think for a start, that would be look at your risk assessment, make sure it's accurate and up to date.
Michael, can I just interject? So obviously, when we say in date, I suppose we'll have people maybe with varying knowledge of sort of Legionella and risk assessments. So what would you, or how do you define whether it's in date or not? I guess it's probably.
So it's a very good question. I mean, the guidelines changed in 2013. There was the backstop for risk assessment reviews was removed completely. Up until that day, it was every 2 years. So I would still, to be fair, recommend that your risk assessment is reviewed on at least 2 years, very minimum. That the whole point of that review time was that the industry believed that you should have had changes to the water system, or changes to management of the water system, or potential few errant temperatures along that line, which would initiate a risk assessment review. That should happen more than every 2 years. So that a backstop, I still think, would be a good place to start at 2 years. So I'd look at your risk assessment and say, if it's not been done in 2 years, then I would be doing a review, just as a matter of course, just as due diligence, really.
Yeah.
Can I just ask Paul around the bursts? What would happen if I walked onto site just to go and check and there was evidence that there was a burst in the car park, for instance?
Excuse me. Yeah, so that's a good question. In a lockdown situation, you have a lot of companies that will lock down with you, so you may not be able to get in contact with someone to come and actually repair it, or temporarily repair it until lockdown's over. But as a matter of course, at the moment, we foresee ourselves as business as usual on commercial sites for stuff like this. So we're available. We're not a 24-hour emergency service, but we can pretty much respond within a day. So unless it's a really bad burst, then we can respond within a day and get that resolved. Yeah. Also, when you walk on site and you see that you've got something like that, you should really have a plan. You should really have something to fall back on, where you know how to shut that off, where you shut it off, and all things like that. And I think that's part of what Andy's supplying today, where you can fill that form in, and it's for everybody. Every key holder can look at it. Every key holder knows where it is, so that piece of paper or that piece of information is there for everyone. You can quickly get that shut down until you can get someone on site.
I suppose that's the key, isn't it? It's it's something we talk about a lot around kind of like water efficiency. It's kind of, if you can get it switched off quick, then you're just going to save on the potential loss of water, which obviously precious resource, but also there's a cost implication for businesses which are currently
Absolutely
really squeezed. So I suppose like on the form that we've got there, one of the things is around kind of like knowing where not only your internal stop tap is, but where your external stop taps are. And just sort of really jotting down that information. Obviously you can supplement these forms as well that we've got with kind of, it's located over in the left hand corner of the car park, and take a photo. So because the problem is when you get an emergency, it's kind of all reason kind of goes out the window a little bit, and you kind of panic a little bit, think, oh, I've got to sort that, and you don't think about it logically. So actually, if you've got a document there that says it is in the bottom right hand corner of the car park, here is a photo of it, you've answered all of those questions straight away, so somebody can go directly there and sort of switch off that water supply.
I think it'd be good.
It's a lot of common sense. Sorry, Michael. It's a lot to do with common sense. I mean, there are things that we can do to mitigate these issues. We can put things in like automatic close-off valves that work from an app, so that you wouldn't even have to go into the place to know it was leaking. There's a lot of things we can do which are always bespoke to each site that we can put in place to mitigate things like that.
Yeah, I was just going to say as well, it's a good time now to actually physically use these valves and make sure they works. I know because my stop tap here in my house, the time that you do need it, you'll find that it's seized up. So it's a good opportunity now just to give it a crank, give it a turn, and make sure these things are actually physically working. So when you need them in, under duress, they will you're a bit more guaranteed they will work. So just good to do that.
I suppose that's a good point, isn't it? It's kind of maintenance of your water systems is really important, and it because it just delivers 99 times out of 100. Unless you've got a problem with it, it just delivers, and you don't really think about it. So I suppose actually, if you just go around and at this point now I'll just go and check and make sure that stop tap works. And if it doesn't, then you can arrange, because if it's something where you're going to need some work doing, you may need to contact your local water company to get them to turn it off in the street for that work to go ahead, or you may need to bring an internal plumber in who freezes pipes to take that off and put in a new one that is going to work. It's all things just to be aware of, and rightly as Paul says, we are. Although today I think we'll probably argue, particularly with Michael being based in Essex, it's particularly warm down there today, and it's even warmer in the north for us. But it won't take long for us to drift into the winter months, and it's always a big push that we put on there around Paul being exactly right. Lag your pipes. Don't give it an excuse for it to freeze and break. But if it does, then you need to be able to switch that water off and switch it off quickly and know exactly where to go.
Yeah, Michael's exactly right about testing your valves and your stop taps, because on larger sites, a lot of them quite old legacy sites. You tend to find that when you go to use something like Michael said, it's totally seized, or there's a spindle snapped or something like that. So the larger sites that we deal with, we always advise them to do these sort of maintenance schedules once a month. Just go around, turn everything, make sure your hydrants are working, make sure your valves are working, because you never know when you're going to need them in anger,
Yeah. Exactly.
What happens if you don't know where your stop tap is?
Well, if you don't know where your stop tap is internally, then...
No, I mean, if you were on a site, if you were on a large site, is there something that would tell you where they were?
Well, you'd normally know it's near the meter. A lot of sites read their own meters, but in the case that you really don't know where it is, then your local water company should be able to tell you that.
Right.
Yeah, that's one of the things actually that we've put on the form. It's sort of we put some emergency contacts on there as well, just to kind of just to have at hand in case there is that kind of emergency where your water company will be one. The other one that you probably need as well is your water retailer, because there was the deregulation of the water market. So they're the people that you get billed by, whereas the water company kind of owns that asset all the way up to that meter point. So they'll have an idea of where the stop taps are from there. So having that number on there for your local water company as well as your retailer, it just gives you the option to contact them direct to say, I've got this problem, I don't know where it is, can you help us out? And I'm sure they'll jump on it and find out where it is on their system and be able to give you some guidance to hopefully to find that. And again, I suppose when you're going through that form, if you don't know where it is, that's probably the time to find out your water company's number, give them a call, just say, look, I'm just prepping, I'm building on contingency here. Could you tell me where it is? A lot of the time they can give you a pretty good idea of where it is, or they can certainly say, well, we know there's a meter here, so it should be somewhere around that locale, and then it might be a little bit of investigation on your side of the site.
Most water companies as well, Andy, if they don't know where it is, they'll come out and actually start looking for it for you, because the last thing they want is for the site not to be able to shut the water down in an emergency, because it's wasting water, it's environment issues, so they'll normally come out and actually do that work for you up to a point.
Yeah, No, that's really interesting. So, I mean, Michael, obviously you mentioned sort of, and we'll mention it every time, sort of it all starts with that risk assessment. And obviously you've talked around making sure it's in date as far as reasonably practicable. And I suppose the other thing that we've had a lot of questions around over this sort of period of time is particularly around sort of flushing after the fact. So we had a lot of customers come to us saying, you know, when we'll probably all remember reasonably vividly that, you know, we kind of came home that day and Boris Johnson came on the TV and went, that's it, shut down, you're not going to work, close your premises down. And everybody kind of went, oh, okay, and they just did. And there wasn't a plan in place around sort of making sure that those assets are used so that there isn't that buildup of Legionella. So what would your interpretation be this time round? That obviously we've already been through it once. So how would that be viewed the second time?
Hopefully second time around we're a little wiser. So I think the first question is similar to what Paul was saying. So it's all about the planning stage. So use your risk assessment and use schematics as the basis for your plan. And I think the next thing is all buildings are different, therefore all uses, our building usage will be different. So I think it's an idea part of formulate a plan to find out what part of the buildings are going to be used. So, for instance, we've got a lot of housing associations that are our clients that have sheltered schemes. So, you've got communal areas within the properties that are potentially going to get locked down and not used. However, you're going to get elevated turnover in individuals' properties, you know, flats, for want of a better word. So, communal areas to avoid congregation of people, potentially high-risk people, they will be locked down. So that's the thing to think about. Then you might get other areas of communal or public buildings where a complete lockdown, everything's locked down. Libraries, for instance, or completely community centres, completely just locked up. So I think the key thing is just to be clear about what your building, what your portfolio basically will be, where it will be, and they'll all be different. So to me, it's a matter of getting a spreadsheet out, getting your building stock, and being really clear about what's closed, what's not, what parts are open and what are not. And I think when we're talking about building usage and water usage, it's really good to be clear at the onset. It's just to define usage. Remembering Legionella control, we're talking about the definition of little used outlets. So unless it's healthcare, so that's any outlet, so not just buildings, any outlets that's used less than once a week. So that could be a toilet not being flushed in a week, that becomes little used. You might have a hairdresser sink, everything else is used, but the hairdresser sink isn't used because you're not doing any haircuts at the moment, or first aid rooms, they're classics. So if you're anything like that, then it's not been used in less than a week, then it goes on the register as little used outlet. That could be the whole building, it could just be areas. So once you define that and you're quite clear, add it to your flushing regime, get it documented on the forms that Andrew's kindly put up, get those used. And again, when building usage is dynamic, you might find that things change, lockdowns start, and you know, I think it will be pretty quick this time if we start doing it again. So things will change on a relatively fast basis. It might be the case that areas of demographics change. So it might be change. You know, old people can't go out anywhere. Well, that might change, and just in areas. So we don't know yet. So my point being that you're going to get different areas of buildings are and aren't used. So get them on the plan and get flushed accordingly. Really, and that'd be a good basis. Is the plan.
I suppose the other thing as well, when you think about it, is that you know, because obviously I think every business is facing it at the minute, certainly with kind of reopening and getting staff kind of back into offices particularly, or into sites. It's the fact that actually there's probably not quite as many people as normal in those buildings. So I suppose, although we're kind of talking about another lockdown coming down potentially, when we've got people coming back into these buildings, actually the regular use may have been acceptable at the time to kind of protect against waterborne pathogens, but if you've only got 20% of the workforce in, or maybe 30% of the workforce in, because that's all you can fit in with social distancing, then in theory, do you then need to still flush or flush more than what you
It's a really good question. I mean, another useful part of that strategy as well is looking at your stored water. So if you've got quite a few buildings with tens of thousands of litres stored in plant rooms, in loft spaces, and the rest of it, in which case, if you could reduce the volume of water stored, or even potentially take 2 or 3 of the storage systems offline, hygienically, of course, and reduce the volume of stored water, so that will increase turnover. That will help, because it's a really good point that if you've got a building with 50,000, cubic litres of water, which we've got a few of them, we've got a few litres of water stored there. If you're flushing your little used outlets, the amount of flushing you would have to do to get a decent turnover, you'd be flushing all day, every day, all the time. You'd never do it. So that is where there's a finite usefulness of flushing, but you've got to give it a go. But certainly, yeah, if you can reduce the stored volume of water.
And that's really interesting as well, because it's kind of, at the minute we're in a status of people coming back into buildings, you know, in whatever volume is safe to get them in at the minute, where you might then think, well, I need to reduce that down, but then if that then starts to creep up, all of a sudden you could be in a situation where all of a sudden you've reduced your water volume to the effect when it's not it's maybe not up to the job to supply everybody at the same time, particularly at rush peak periods. And I suppose, is there anything that you can do? Is there temporary measures you can put in place as opposed to a permanent reduction? I was thinking, I know you'd mentioned something about ball valves. We talked about in the last Q&A about actually you just drop the ball valve down, which effectively reduces the height of the tank, so therefore there's less volume. That might be a way of getting around it.
And it's not. It shouldn't be. It should be within the realms of possibilities. Like I say, if you've got 4 storage systems to take 2 offline, it's a relatively easy valving exercise to do that. So that should be could be an idea. Or the increased use of valves that have got a delayed reaction as well. So delayed response valves. So basically, the storage system drops down to quite a level before it's filled up again. They're coming to their own at times like this, so they're really useful. Not cheap, but they're kind of really good bits of kit.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing as well is just to think about, when we're talking about flushing as well, just to be clear about who's doing that as part of the plan. I think it's really good to do a risk assessment on the people who you potentially asking to do the flushing. Because if they don't do it correctly, then there's an elevated chance that they're going to have a face full of aerosols if they're not doing it correctly. So it's a matter of doing it proportionally, doing it correctly, and in a measured manner, so they're not generating aerosols. So if you've got showers, take the shower heads offline. We've talked about this before. Take the shower heads off, take the shower hose and kind of put it down towards the drain area, obviously maintain an air gap and give that a good turnover so you're not getting a face full of aerosols. They're really, really important measures, so that's useful.
Yeah,
I suppose
that applies for, sorry, Andy, that applies for when you flush your mains, because obviously if mains are static, you've got the same issue. But it takes a bit more to get mains flowing again. But you know, it's the same principle. Don't expect your job man to be able to do this on your site, because you've got hydraulic pressures, you've got hydraulic sound waves coming back, and if it's not done correctly, these hydraulic pressures can actually create bursts on mains. So it's got to be done by either somebody who's trained on valving, or somebody who actually has the responsibility already for doing this and they're used to doing this. It can't be just given to any odd job man on the site. It's got to be a trained person, really.
Yeah, I suppose one of the other things as well is we're kind of talking about sort of particularly around the Legionella stuff, because as part of the risk assessment, obviously you get a schematic drawn, and I know that one of the things that poses quite a challenge around, particularly if you've got a leak and you've got a leak but you don't know where it is, particularly on sort of larger sites, but just as well on smaller sites for that matter, that actually if there's no schematic of where the water pipes underground are, it just becomes that much more challenging. And I suppose is this a time where actually as part of this plan reviewing of, do you have a schematic of your site? Do you know where your assets are and your water pipes underground? Because if you do have an issue, you need to sort it out quickly. Having a plan makes things a lot more easier to identify and fix.
Absolutely. I mean, the sites that I deal with, I've put a lot of things in place for them for this type of thing. And what you'll find is that you can design step tests for the site and stuff like that. So, they can go around and they know exactly what to shut, when to shut it, how it identifies leakage. And you can do this for sites, but a lot of sites don't have schematic drawings because the legacy sites, one company's moved out, one's moved in, the older sites. So it's a lot of the time people are scrambling to find this information. It's not there. It hasn't been there for years. This is a big problem on Network Rail, because when it all got privatized or turned into Network Rail, from Railtrack, a lot of people lost their jobs and they took all that information with them, all things like this. So that happens all over industry. disgruntled employees, I suppose. But the point I'm trying to make is a lot of these sites don't have anything at all. So if you haven't got it, you really need to put something in place.
Yeah. So how could you go about doing that, Paul? What's the best route of tracking pipes?
Yeah,
Where they are?
There's certain levels of survey. There's surveys where it's just sort of assumed, so you can get an assumed survey by somebody who's an expert in water mains, and then you can go for a more expensive option, which is tracing the pipework, and that can be anything from quite simple process with electronic equipment. If it's metallic pipe on the site, if it's not metallic pipe, then it's a lot more in depth and a lot more costly to get them drawings produced. But it's possible on all sites. It's just there's different levels of what a site will need and what it'll cost to get to that point.
I suppose it's probably a top tip there, isn't it? If you're having any pipework installed or remodeled, is to make sure you get a plan out of it from them, even if it's not the entire site. At least you know where that bit is, and over time you can kind of start building it together, and then you've got a bit of a better view.
All you need is measurements from buildings, things like that. You don't need to be, technically amazing to do this. You just need measurements from buildings of where the trench was, put it onto a drawing, and that's accurate enough.
Yeah.
Can I ask about things that you would, if you were normally in the office, you would check things like fire hydrants regularly. What would we do during lockdown then? Do we just leave them?
Fire hydrants. It's well, when water stops flowing in mains, like we spoke about, it starts to become an issue. So, I mean, we'll always advise our customers that if you're not using your site, or you're not using a leg of main or something like that that's got water in it, we'd like you to flush it for 2 minutes every week at a low rate of flow, just to get that water moving. And I think sites have to be aware that these type of maintenance schedules have to be put into place, because most sites, none of us have come across anything like this before, and most sites are drawing water off every single day, so it doesn't become an issue. But when you're talking about lockdowns and things like that, then it does become an issue. And like Michael can tell you, waterborne diseases can be created, and it's not nice when you drink this stuff. So, you've got to put something in place to be able to flush. That's imperative,
It's a really good point, actually, because one of the things that we have to do is from a down, internally, is try and get the temperature as best we can under 20 degrees for cold. So if you think about that, if you've got a main that's running around the outside of a building that's stagnant or is not turned over much, with ground temperatures, especially this time of year, you're gonna get that creeping up. And a lot of our systems, we use automated systems. It's just basically, we call it seasonal variation for obvious reasons. But if you were to start flushing stuff out in the street, for want of a better word, actually on your property outside, then that would help get that baseline a bit lower. So that would help out from a Legionella perspective as well. So it's a kind of joined up approach.
Yeah, and like you're saying there, Michael, when you get stagnant water in mains, a lot of mains on private sites are not checked for depth and things like that when they're laid.
Yeah.
So, a good contractor will put it at the correct depth with 750 or 900 cover, whichever water company area it is, and that's great. That should protect. But a lot of companies will not dig that deep and create issues like what Michael's just been talking about, where the heat from the ground can actually penetrate the pipe itself, which becomes an issue. Something you wouldn't think about.
I was going to say, I suppose when you talk about the depth, and we're talking about heat there, but I suppose that probably goes for cold as well, does it? It's dug down that deep to keep it at a reasonable temperature, not prone to frost, I guess. Or frost.
I mean, moving water inside the pipe shouldn't freeze, but when you're talking about the depths of winter in a lockdown, it won't be moving at all. So it'll be that much easier to create ice in a pipe and burst.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I mean, we've covered quite a few different topics there around kind of the water aspect of things. And I realise we're kind of coming up to half an hour here, so we said we would try and keep this a little bit short. We've been having a good old chin wag, but I think one of the other things is like, and it's on the form, but one of the things to probably really concentrate is around sort of your key contacts. So who's responsible for looking after your site or your building? Do you have a deputy? Because at the end of the day, we don't want anybody to get ill, but if somebody gets ill, COVID or not, then there needs to be somebody else who can step in there in case there's anything that needs to be looked after. Make sure you have all those contact details for water companies, You may even need it if you're a large site with large infrastructure. It may be that you've got a contact in the fire brigade that you're regularly in contact with. Particularly, we do some work with Coma 1 sites, for instance. Make sure you've got your subcontractors' details to hand. So if it's around your Legionella contract and you're looking around your risk assessment, you get someone in to come and do that. Have their contact details there. The same for if you think you're going to have a water leak, maybe he's an internal plumber and an external plumber, if that's the way you're going to go about it. Insurance company as well. You may need to inform your insurance company that you're going to close down your building. I imagine it was probably standard point when the government said lockdown, but in local lockdowns they may require you to do that, so just bear that in mind as well. And then the other thing that we when we were all having a chat around sort of what we could cover in this to try and help you guys out there. One of the things that we'd mentioned with Michael particularly was when the lockdown first happened and we were trying to get access to do the flushing, we couldn't get access to buildings because normally there's people in there or there's a site contact or somebody who can let us in, and they weren't there because they were either were doing other duties that possibly being furloughed or whatever situation. And it was kind of, you need to make sure that not only can the people who are going to be responsible from your business point of view access the building, alarm codes, keys, etc. But also if you're going to have subcontractors or contractors come in to fulfill those duties for you, you need to have a conversation with them now that actually if this happened, this is how we would manage that situation for getting access to a building.
Yeah, it's not the best time to find out that there's no keys in the key boxes and the alarm codes and key codes are incorrect and not known. This is not the time. So really, that should all be done beforehand. So yeah.
Yeah, I think as well, Andy, you mentioned it. Just get more key holders for your work sites. Introduce more key holders because you don't know, you possibly get furloughed or become sick or something like that. When you need that person. So yeah, more key holders. Yeah,
I suppose on that as well, if you've got key holders as part of this, you probably want a list of key holders, contact details, numbers internally, just so that you can kind of work through that almost progression. Because if you ring someone you can't get through, you go to the next person on the list and you move your way forward. I suppose there's one kind of final question I've kind of got from me is kind of Louise rightly brought up if you came on site and you were suffering a burst, or you could kind of see water coming out of the ground. It doesn't happen very often, in fairness. If you've seen any of our past presentations, I think was it 95% it'll just disappear. So it's kind of how would you even know that you had a leak if you're not on site?
Well, we actually have some technology that we can put on a site's main income and revenue meter or any sub meters on the site even. It's called AMR, that means automated meter reading, and what that does is that attaches to your water meter. There shouldn't be any intrusion, there shouldn't be any issues. It's just a clip-on, it's a clip-on piece of kit that's magnetic, takes the pulses off your meter, sends them to our logger sends it to the cloud. You can view it on a computer, your phone, your tablet, and you can set alarms up. So if you're going to shut down, Andy, you're going to be using sort of near zero use. You can set alarms to actually tell you when usage occurs. So usage is going to be a burst, isn't it, if you shut down? So you'll know instantly.
It's a good time to do that now, isn't it?
It is a good time to do it, yeah.
I suppose we've got a lot of
customers out there with our AMR, and they find it absolutely invaluable, because bursts overnight, things like that, they know straight away. They don't have to wait 8, 9, 10 hours till they get back onto site with hundreds of thousands of litres being wasted and a big hole in the road, so they can pretty much know immediately, send someone to site to actually shut that leg down.
Meter readings are well as a good idea, to a good indication of how much flushing's been going on as well inside the building.
Yeah, so it does really meter readings as well. Just automatically. Absolutely.
I mean, one of the things on the form as well is to take a meter reading when the first lockdown came round, and I don't know if this is going to extend, so you would have to look into it with your water retailer. But obviously the government kind of put a message out there saying basically you weren't going to be paying for your water rates basically, and what you had to do was provide a meter reading at the start and a meter reading at the end, just to see if there was any water usage over that period of time, and that would be a good thing to have on there, is like actually if you're going to have to close down because of a local lockdown, go take that meter reading, you've got a reference of it. You know, when you come back, have I used any water? Well, if you've been using water over that period of time, the likelihood of it is either you've got a process running in the background, you may well have been following Michael's guidance. You might have been doing your flushing, but that should only be probably a relatively small number on there. If you've been using a lot of water, then it's probably indicative of a leak there, which, you know, then takes us full circle back around to, you know, you then need to go down the leak detection route to fix that. And where's your stopcocks? And
I would say as well, Andy, take a photograph of that reading.
That's a really good idea.
Any argument to when it was took.
That's a good idea. Yes, yeah, get a timestamp one. That always helps everybody out. And to be honest, I'm sure the water retailers would be welcome of that information coming to them, because then that allows them to know exactly what they're billing and where they're billing from. So it probably just again, it's just prepping information and having it at hand. Brilliant. I think I'm tapped out for questions. Has anybody got anything else they'd like to add, or any questions asked? No? Okie doke. Thanks very much, everybody, for watching us today. We hope, as usual, you found it useful, and hopefully that will kind of get the old brain ticking over on a kind of a few things that maybe would be a good idea for your business, just to kind of prep just in case there's a lockdown. We obviously hope, Bray, that there isn't one, but if there is one, it's best to be prepared.
And do you know the old saying? Prepare
to fail or fail to prepare.
That's
I get it wrong the wrong way.
I was going to try and do it, but I thought, well, I'll let you, because you'll get it right first time.
I don't know if I did. I might have failed, but if not, look it up. I'm sure you can find it on Google. So yeah, again, the documents are there. Download them. They're free. They're for you to use. The one that we've done for the local lockdown, it's an Excel document. You can edit it. You can add whatever you need into it or take it away. If you've got any feedback on that, please do send it to our email address, tws@nwl.co.uk. And what we'll do is we'll progressively upload that document and just update it, put it back on the website. It'll be there for everybody. We've also recorded this. So what we'll do is we'll get this up on the website as well. So if you need to watch it back or go back over anything, please do so. Other than that, our contact details will be on the end of the video. You know, our website. Give us a call. We're here to talk, as you can tell, and we're here to help you out more than anything. So at the end of this, there's a really short questionnaire, 24 questions. They're pretty much yes or no ones. If you could fill them in for us, it really does help us kind of understand whether we're doing the right thing and whether we're providing that value for you. And other than that, I shall say thank you very much and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.